Can I ask you about the 50 Cent Young Buck controversy? What's your opinion?
Who?
And Buck, I think that's over. I think that's done, but
What do you mean?
I think his career is finished.
He actually ended up joining up with you.
Buck is a don't, bruh. I hate Buck. I hate Young Buck, fam. Buck is a so we ain't gonna talk about Buck at all, period.
Apologize for the 18th time. And
Right.
look,
Young Buck,
it's the 18th time,
apologize. Okay.
but it's cool. It's cool because, like, I mean, that's on if Crazy 50 gonna accept that.
G-Unit might be a thing of the past now, but there was a time when they were the hottest group in the game, taking the world by storm. Sure, 50 Cent was the front man and face of the group, but let's not forget about the rest of the crew, especially Young Buck, who brought his own flavor to the table.
Young Buck was a good dude.
I like Young Buck. I think he keep it real. I like his music. I really like to hear him talk.
That old tape your phone call type shit. Boy, there's some whole type. Put a pad on for that. Real talk.
Watch me do my thing. I got these groupies open. I'm riding presidential. I'm the one that they.
Buck still my. You still my. You know what I mean? He was the raw in G-Unit. You know what I'm saying? So he gonna be alright.
Peace in the streets. Young Buck, call me.
Buck was the southern spice that gave G-Unit a whole new edge. While G-Unit was born and bred in Queens, New York, 50 knew that to truly dominate, he needed to expand beyond the East Coast. That's when he brought Young Buck into the fold, adding a southern touch to the mix. Later, he signed The Game, repping the West Coast. So G-Unit ended up covering every major territory in the rap game. Young Buck added a unique energy to G-Unit. He brought that southern flair with his wild energy, raw bars, different slang, and a whole new sound that fans couldn't get enough of. He wasn't just sticking to the G-Unit formula either. Buck was out there collaborating with a ton of southern artists and other big names, bringing fresh sounds and new vibes into the mix.
Young Buck, T.I., Ludacris, Dirty South, yeah!
This was something G-Unit needed, especially since 50 Cent, Lloyd Banks, and Tony Yayo mostly stuck to featuring G-Unit artists on their tracks. Buck was breaking boundaries and broadening the group's reach, and because of that, he was constantly delivering new music and keeping things fresh. He quickly became one of the most consistent members of the crew, always putting in the work and dropping new tracks. But just when it seemed like Young Buck's career was on the rise, things took a sharp turn for the worse. It was like everything just went off the rails overnight. Of course, his very public falling out with 50 Cent played a massive role in his downfall. But while some artists managed to bounce back after parting ways with their bosses, Young Buck seemed to go from bad to worse.
And Buck, I think that's over. I think that's done, but
What do you mean?
I think his career is finished.
It was one thing after another, and controversies just kept piling up. Remember the time when rumors spread like wildfire about him being bi? That really shook things up for him.
Young Buck is a LGBT member. Listen, too many trans women have came out to out his okay? At this point, this man is.
It wasn't just gossip online either. He was actually confronted about it in public, which only added fuel to the fire.
How you doing? What's up with you and 50?
Taking off the camera.
You said what?
Taking off the camera.
What's up with you and 50?
Taking off the camera.
What you mean take you off the camera, bro?
Taking off. You don't want to be recorded.
So he said trainers, is that true?
Hold on for it.
Oh no, we about to scrap. Is that true?
Young Buck tried to set the record straight by going on an angry rant, but instead of clearing things up, it just seemed to make things more complicated. The rumors didn't die down, and if anything, they got louder.
Whatever the thought you seen on the tape, that ain't no tape or no mother punks my or cook up in particular.
As if that wasn't enough, Young Buck made some seriously bad decisions that only dug his hole deeper. He refused to pay his taxes and continued to spend money like it was going out of style. This reckless spending led to some serious financial problems, and eventually, he had to file for bankruptcy.
I ended up having to file bankruptcy into that situation.
The home once owned by rap artist Young Buck is up for sale. The house, valued at $350,000, was raided by the IRS as payment for $300,000 in back taxes.
All these missteps and controversies caused his career to take a nosedive, and now, unfortunately, Young Buck is slowly fading into the background. But it raises the question, how did he end up here? What happened to the Young Buck who brought that southern heat to G-Unit and helped them conquer the rap world? Let's dive in and find out. Young Buck, born David Brown on March 15, 1981, in Nashville, Tennessee, had a rough start that would later shape his music career. He grew up on a street called Sea of Fried in North Nashville, but life had other plans for him and his mother, who eventually moved them to South Nashville. They settled in the J.C. Napier homes, way down from the square. The moves didn't stop there, though. They later found themselves in the South 7 projects. Buck was always on the move, bouncing around from Hillwood to Overton to White Creek and just about everywhere else in Nashville. By the time he was 8 years old, he knew Nashville like the back of his hand. To make some quick cash, Young Buck did whatever he could. You could find him pumping gas, mowing lawns, washing cars, anything that would help him get a little money in his pocket. His hustle didn't go unnoticed. Since he was always seen around Nashville, some of the older folks started calling him Young Buck. The name stuck, and he eventually embraced it when he started rapping. Even before he hit the big leagues, Buck was already sharpening his skills by freestyling with his friends and battling anyone who dared to challenge him. This built up a local buzz and got people talking about him. One day, Buck and his friend Lil Jimmy stumbled upon a CD by BG, an artist signed to Cash Money Records at the time. The album was called Chopper City, and on the back of the CD, there was a phone number to contact Cash Money Records. Without really knowing what they were doing, Buck and Lil Jimmy decided to call that number. They pretended to be event promoters and said they wanted to book Cash Money to perform in Nashville. The quoted price was $5,000, and before they knew it, Cash Money was on their way to Nashville, thinking they were set to perform. The show didn't end up happening, but that wasn't the end of the story. Instead, Buck and Lil Jimmy got the chance to meet everyone at Cash Money Records. When they finally met, Birdman didn't waste any time. He asked Buck to spit a freestyle right there on the spot, and just like that, Buck found himself in a rap battle with none other than Lil Wayne. They went back and forth, and Buck's skills made a big impression on Birdman.
And Baby was there. Baby first words to me, I never forget him in life, was when he looked at me up and down, and he said, spit something, Lil Wayne. So me and Wayne had a standoff almost. You know, Wayne spit, I would spit. Wayne would spit, I would spit.
Seeing the potential in Buck, Birdman decided to take him under his wing. Buck was brought from Nashville down to New Orleans to hang out with the Cash Money crew and possibly sign a record deal. Hungry for success, Buck dropped out of school at just 14 years old to fully dedicate himself to his music career. This was back in 1995, and Cash Money Records wasn't yet the massive label it would eventually become. Birdman was still working hard to make a name for the label and his artists, like the Hot Boys. For the next 3 to 4 years, Buck was with Cash Money hoping to break through and launch his career. However, despite his talent, things didn't quite pan out the way he hoped. While Lil Wayne, Juvenile, BG, and other Cash Money artists were blowing up and getting their time in the spotlight, Young Buck felt sidelined. None of his music ever got released, and it seemed like he was always on the back burner. Despite being around for so long, the only proof that he was ever with Cash Money is his appearance in the Big Timers' Big Ballin' music video. By 1999, Buck had had enough. He was tired of waiting around, watching everyone else's career take off while his own dreams seemed stuck in neutral. Frustrated and eager to make something happen for himself, Buck decided it was time to leave Cash Money and carve out his own path.
In 2 years of my life, I hung up under Baby, kind of like back and forth. Out of those years, I mean, they progress was happening. You never even heard me on a project. Time passed and I'm watching all this success and not seeing nothing happen for me.
In 1999, after leaving Cash Money, Young Buck headed back to Nashville and decided to take matters into his own hands. He linked up with some of his local friends, including a rapper named D-Tay. Together, they worked on an independent album titled Thuggin' Till the End. The album dropped on August 22, 2000, and it ended up doing pretty well. It managed to chart on Billboard, hitting number 34 on the US R&B charts and number 17 on the US independent charts. Buck was able to sell about $10,000 worth of music, which was a big deal for him. It was around this time he realized that music could be a real hustle, a legit way to make money, much more sustainable than the street life he had been caught up in. Despite his success with music, Buck still had one foot in the streets. That all changed when he became a victim of a home invasion. He was shot multiple times during the incident, which served as a wake-up call for him. It was a life-or-death situation, and Buck realized he needed to make a serious change if he wanted to survive. After that, he decided to put the streets behind him for good and focus entirely on his music career.
And out of my ordeal back in the streets, I ended up getting shot in a home invasion.
But from that moment of me being shot, I made a decision within myself and within life that changed my whole entire life.
With his renewed focus, Buck began to build a solid buzz in Nashville and beyond. His name started ringing out once again, and it wasn't long before Birdman took notice. Birdman reached out to Buck and told him he was putting together a new group called Head Busses and wanted Buck to be part of it. Excited about the opportunity, Buck flew back down to New Orleans to meet with Birdman and see what was up. When he got there, he saw that everything had changed. Cash Money had blown up since the last time he was there. The offices were bigger, the cars were nicer, everything seemed way more extravagant. But despite all the glitz and glamour, things didn't move as quickly as Buck had hoped. He spent about a week just waiting around, with no official paperwork being signed. Frustrated by the lack of progress, Buck started to feel like he was in the same situation he was in before.
Led to me getting a call again from Baby. You know, this time it was more or less, yo, I'm about to start this group called Head Busses. So, you know, at the end of the day, I went back. After being there for like a week or so of sitting around, I started to get a little itchy. Like you said, I done became a man now. It ain't like I was a child.
Then, Buck ran into Juvenile, who was also in New Orleans at the time. Juvenile told Buck he was planning to leave Cash Money and start his own thing, a new label called UTP Records. He invited Buck to join him, and Buck decided to roll with him.
And he was like, man, you wanna get up out of here for a minute? You know what I'm saying? And I took that ride with Juvie. And that's where my career started, with Juvenile.
He got a contract to sign with UTP, but instead of rushing into it, Buck took the contract and just shoved it under his bed. He never officially signed it, which meant he wasn't legally bound to Juvenile's label. Even without signing the contract, Buck released 2 projects under UTP Records. The first was Born to Be a Thug, which came out on October 10th, 2002. The second was a compilation album with the group UTP Playas, released just 2 days earlier on October 8th, 2002. However, as time went on, Buck noticed that Juvenile was dealing with his own issues, especially regarding his former label, Cash Money, and some personal struggles. While on tour with Juvenile, their bus made a stop in New York City. This was back in 2002, right when 50 Cent was starting to blow up and was the hottest name in New York. The bus driver for Juvenile's tour happened to have a connection with 50's former manager, Shaw Money XL. Buck saw this as an opportunity and kept pushing the driver to see if he could get 50 Cent to come onto the bus and maybe even record some tracks with them. Eventually, 50 showed up, but he was there specifically to work with Juvenile. They went to the back of the tour bus to start recording, and Buck decided to make the most of his time. He played some of his solo tracks for Lloyd Banks and Tony Yayo, hoping to catch their attention. As Buck played a few songs, one track stood out to Lloyd Banks. Banks liked what he heard and took the track to the back of the bus to show it to 50 Cent. That track ended up being Bloodhound, which later appeared on 50's debut album Get Rich or Die Tryin'.
From that part, and I'll tell y'all, that record was Bloodhound on 50's Get Rich or Die Tryin'. Basically 50, you know, heard the record and liked the record, seen what he seen in me, gave me the biggest opportunity of my life.
This wasn't the first time Buck had worked with 50, Lloyd Banks, and Tony Yayo, though. They had all previously collaborated on a track called A Lil Bit of Everything, which was featured on the mixtape 50 Cent is the Future. Even though 50 Cent was interested in Buck, he wasn't signed to any label at that point, so there wasn't much 50 could do for him in terms of a record deal. As time went on, Buck's situation with UTP began to fall apart. He was dealing with issues and disagreements, and soon found himself without a label again, looking for a new opportunity. Just a week after things fell through with UTP, Buck got a call from 50 Cent. 50 told him, "We want that Bloodhound track for the album. We'll pay you $20,000 for it. Let us put it on Get Rich or Die Tryin'." He also mentioned that the track was getting mixed by none other than Eminem and Dr. Dre, which was a huge deal. 50 then invited Buck to fly out to Los Angeles to meet with him, Eminem, and Dr. Dre, and to discuss officially signing with G-Unit. This was a major turning point for Buck and his career, marking the beginning of his rise to fame with G-Unit. Instead of giving young Buck his own solo album right away, 50 Cent had a different strategy in mind. He decided to drop a G-Unit group album first, called Beg for Mercy. This album served as a way to introduce young Buck to the world, letting people get a taste of what he could bring to the table before he went solo. The move paid off big time. The album was a massive success, peaking at number 2 on the Billboard 200 and selling a whopping 377,000 copies in its first week. Over time, it went on to sell over 2.7 million copies in the US alone and is nearing diamond status worldwide. This was a huge win for G-Unit, and with Buck officially on the map, he was ready to drop his own debut album. By 2004, young Buck was all set to show the world what he could do on his own. But before dropping his solo album, he followed G-Unit's playbook of releasing a mixtape to build some buzz. So on May 31st, 2004, he dropped his first official mixtape called Welcome to the Hood, hosted by DJ Woo Kid on the G-Unit platform. The mixtape did its job, getting people hyped up for what was to come. Then, in the summer of 2004, on July 2nd, Buck released a few singles that really started to gain traction. Just a month and a half later, on August 24th, 2004, he finally released his debut album, Straight Outta Cashville. The album debuted at number 3 on the charts, selling 361,000 copies in its first week. It didn't take long for the album to go platinum, solidifying Buck's place in the rap game. With the success of his album came a new level of fame, and of course, the inevitable award show appearances. On November 15th, 2004, Buck attended the 2004 Vibe Awards, an event that would have a lasting impact on his career. That night, the place was packed with big names like Dr. Dre, Eminem, 50 Cent, and the whole G-Unit crew, along with Suge Knight. During the event, a man named Jimmy Johnson allegedly attacked Dr. Dre, and young Buck, always ready to ride for his people, reportedly stabbed Johnson in response. After the incident, Buck was on the run for a bit before eventually turning himself in a few days later. It took about a year and a half for the legal drama to settle. And in the end, Buck received 3 years of probation and was ordered to perform 80 hours of community service. After that mess, Buck went back to what he knew best, the music. He started dropping a bunch of mixtapes, but while he was focusing on his music, there were some major changes happening behind the scenes at G-Unit Records. 50 Cent and his former manager Shaw Money XL, who managed all the artists on the label, started having some serious disagreements about how the business should be run. 50 decided it was time for everyone to get new management, and that put Buck in a tough spot. Buck was really close to Shaw Money and didn't want to just leave him hanging, so he tried to stick by his side. This didn't sit well with 50, who started to see Buck's loyalty to Shaw Money as a problem.
50 immediately started to bring me and the guys together in the rooms at the office and say things like, well, look, y'all gonna have to find another manager. I just dropped Buck the World. Not only that, this is the only manager I know. Not only that, Shaw Money had became a best friend of mine. I'm the best man on this man's wedding.
But that wasn't the only issue between Buck and 50. According to 50, another big issue was that Buck was getting too friendly with all of 50's enemies at the time, like The Game, Jadakiss, Fat Joe, Jim Jones, and others. On top of that, 50 claimed that Buck was reckless with his money, spending way too much and not taking care of his taxes. 50 said he even had to step in and pay Buck's taxes twice. By the third time, 50 had enough, and it really strained their relationship. Around this time, people started noticing that Buck wasn't rolling with the G-Unit crew as much. He was often seen performing by himself, which raised a lot of eyebrows. Interviewers kept asking him if he was still part of G-Unit, and while Buck always insisted he was, he would add that they were all just doing their own thing and focusing on building their individual brands.
Now, I'm G-Unit to the bone.
Okay, I was about so G-Unit, Buck is G-Unit all
straight
day.
up and down.
Ain't going nowhere.
God forbid, but the minute that you ever see me away from this is death or the penitentiary. I don't believe in
breaking up with.
However, things took a turn in January 2008 when Buck performed at a show with Lil Wayne and Birdman. During the performance, Birdman publicly suggested that Buck should join Young Money Cash Money and leave what he called Buck's BS label. Buck seemed to agree, and this definitely didn't sit well with 50.
I'm trying to fuck with him. Believe it, dead. Pull him from out that other. Believe that. That's how it's supposed to be. Hold on, Wayne. Fuck that. Where he started at. Where he started at. Where he started at. So like I said, Young Money, Cash Money, Young Buck.
Then, in March 2008, Yo Rap's magazine published an interview with Buck where he dropped a bombshell. He claimed he had never received any royalties from 50 Cent or G-Unit Records. He said, "I'm still waiting on a royalty check, period. I've never seen a royalty check since I've signed with G-Unit, so hell yeah. I'll tell you one damn thing, that show money is good. I've never in my career cashed a royalty check. How you like that?" This statement caused a lot of drama, but what made things even messier was that the interview was actually old, and the magazine released it months after it was conducted. Shaw Money XL, who was still managing Buck at the time, quickly tried to do damage control the very next day, denying Buck's claims. But the damage was done, and the tension between Buck and 50 kept escalating. Just a couple of weeks later, on April 7th, 2008, 50 Cent called into Hot 97 and made it official. Young Buck was no longer a part of G-Unit as a group member. However, he was still signed to G-Unit Records as a solo artist.
You can take this as official notice right here, because we're on the hottest morning show in the world right now.
Ow.
Young Buck is no longer in the group G-Unit, but signed to G-Unit solo artist.
The week after that first announcement, G-Unit as a whole showed up at Hot 97. This time, 50 Cent gave a little more insight into why Young Buck was no longer in the group. He mentioned that Buck was dealing with a problem, which shed more light on the friction between them. Buck stayed silent about these claims for a bit, but then a couple of weeks later, he decided to speak up in his own way. On May 12, 2008, he dropped a track called My Interview, where he addressed being kicked out of G-Unit and also talked about the accusations. Things went quiet for a moment, but that didn't last long. On June 15, 2008, Young Buck got back on stage and, in a heated moment, yelled out, "FG Unit." It was a clear sign that there was no going back. From there, Buck went all in with the diss tracks, firing shots at 50 Cent and G-Unit. He even teamed up with The Game, who had his own beef with 50, to throw more fuel on the fire. For the rest of 2008, Buck's music output was pretty sparse though. According to him, 50 was doing everything he could to stop him from dropping a new album, putting roadblocks up at every turn. With his album plans on hold, Buck decided to pivot and in 2009 began dropping a slew of mixtapes, trying to keep his name buzzing in the streets. But things took a turn for the worse in 2010. On August 3rd, 2010, the IRS raided Young Buck's home over more than $300,000 in unpaid taxes. During the raid, they found a gun, which was a major problem because Buck was a convicted felon due to the incident at the 2004 Vibe Awards. This led to more legal trouble, and in March 2011, G-Unit Records filed a massive $10 million lawsuit against him. It was just one thing after another for Buck in 2011. Things kept spiraling downward. He got involved in a drive-by shooting, although thankfully he wasn't injured. His girlfriend, however, wasn't so lucky and got hurt.
One of the guys ended up grabbing all of that old and I'm like, hold on, homie, chill, you know what I mean? That's my old lady. It turned into you ain't your old lady type of thing. And I could see the fire coming from the car, so I kind of knew what the car was and shit. And I just grabbed my old lady at that time, man, and pushed her down. She got hit.
Not long after, Buck was sentenced to 18 months in prison on weapons charges because of that gun the IRS found. To make matters worse, the IRS held an auction to sell off Buck's assets to recoup some of the money he owed. They managed to get back about $53,000, which was only a drop in the bucket compared to what he owed. After he got out of prison, Buck dropped a few more mixtapes trying to get his career back on track. But then, more drama hit. He got arrested for to burn down his ex-girlfriend's apartment. This led to another sentence of 7 months in prison, handed down on August 10th, 2016. For a moment, it seemed like Buck and 50 might have squashed their beef. At one point, 50 even paid off some of Buck's tax debt, and Buck even said he wanted his new album to be produced by both 50 and Dr. Dre.
Shout out to Battle Cat, he got a real strong relationship with Dre. My vision is to have 50 and Dre, you know, get behind the next executive produce my next project.
But that truce was short-lived. Buck went back to dropping more mixtapes, but none of them really made an impact. By 2023, it seemed like Buck was ready to move on from it all. He announced he was selling his music catalog, a move that felt like the final chapter in his roller coaster of a career. It's a shame, really, because young Buck had so much potential. He brought a unique flavor to G-Unit and had a lot of talent, but unfortunately, his career was cut short by all the drama, legal trouble, and internal beef. Fans of Buck and G-Unit can't help but wonder what could have been if things had gone differently. The group could have reached even greater heights, but the petty squabbles and missteps held them back.